I would like to call to order the meeting of the Finance Committee on Monday, June the 2nd. This meeting is called to order. The Reverend Ken Dawson will lead us in prayer, and followed by the pledge.
Let us pray. Father, as we come, we thank you for the opportunity, O God, to serve the people of this great parish. Father, we know to whom much is given, much is required. And Father, we accept that responsibility, and we pray for your wisdom to guide us tonight. Father, we especially pray for Kim's brother and that family, O God, who we just found out a tragic accident, O God, and that you just minister unto them, O God, during this time. Now, Father, we thank you for all the things that you've given us, O God, all the promises, O God, which we receive. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All of the, we lost Travis? One member of the Finance Committee is absent at this moment, Travis Turner, but Travis was here earlier, so I expect that he'll return. Otherwise, he's not going to be back? Okay. Well, in light of that, Councilman Turner is absent, and all the other members are here. Don't have any chairs additions. If there is anyone here in the public who would like to comment on an agenda item, feel free to sign a comment card and have that sent forward. You'll have 3 minutes at the appropriate time to speak on any issue on the agenda. And I'd like at this time, as a courtesy to Mr. Tommy Lejeune, invite him to come forward and give his presentation. That's moving item number 18 up to the front.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, I appreciate the opportunity that you've given it to me and my firm to do the audit for the parish. We certainly appreciate it. What I've got for you tonight is just a packet of high-level information of the 2013 audit. Basically, a lot of high-level financial statistics. You know, the book itself is, right at 300 pages, so I'll save us the time. And certainly any point that you read through that as you go through it later, I can come back and sort of go over any specific questions that you have. But what I've got for you is a separate packet that is stapled with your bound audit report. We've gone over this information with the members of your staff, the audit committee, as well as President Martinez, so this will be sort of a second round for them. Basically, if you go to page 3, and what we've got depicted for you here is a recap of all the parish's net worth, starting with 2012, what occurred during 2013, and then how you ended the fiscal year that we audited. Basically, as you look at it, we've got 3 broad categories. Discretionary dollars, those monies that you've got no real restriction in terms of activity of how you're supposed to spend money, or no voter restriction. The second group of funds you'll see under restricted operating funds, those are activities that are funded with some sort of dedicated tax, a property tax, a sales tax, grant funds, things that you have some sort of external legal obligation to spend in a certain manner. And then the third category is restricted capital outlay and debt service funds, similar to operating funds, other than there's a similar restriction, but these are limited to basically infrastructure projects, building projects, things of that nature. But as you go through this, you can see you started the year right at about $148 million. During the year, we had a surplus. The parish had a surplus of about $4.8 million. So it ended the year just over $152 million in net worth. I mean, obviously that's pretty strong. As you kind of go down and look at the categories, from a discretionary standpoint, you ended the year right at about $17.6 million. So nice sum of money. You've built that up over time. I can recall back, when I began auditing the parish, that you had about $3 or $4 million in that fund. So you can see over the course of time, it's built up to probably the highest that I can recall in my memory. But certainly doesn't represent an endless source of money. $17 million, you've got some flexibility. You don't have a lot of flexibility. As you come down and you look at the restricted operating funds, here you had a surplus of about $13 million, getting you from $68 million in net worth to right at about $82 million in net worth. You know, if you look at all these funds, you can see where the designations are. You've got $36 million of that 81 in your drainage area, so those funds are dedicated solely for spending on drainage projects and running your drainage department. And you can see the next big ticket item is fire protection. You know, those are going to be just basically fire related, you know, running the different fire protection districts that you have. So you don't have as much flexibility in terms of taking this money and going, you know, for instance, taking drainage money and going build a road. You know, that's not going to be within the purview of your property or sales tax. So you just limit it to that particular activity. And as you come down and look at the restricted funds, here the two biggest items that you have are drainage and roads, and this is simply the accumulation of dollars for major infrastructure capital outlay. You can see for the year you had a deficit of about $11 million, but really not alarming in the sense that the money that you've accumulated here was designated for major projects. So you're going to go through a period of time where you have asset accumulation, then you have projects, and you spend the money down. Drainage, you had a pretty big bond issued a number of years ago, so the design here is to spend it down. So to see that deficit is not an alarming trend. But overall, you can basically see just what happened. I mean, you take out the capital outlay, and even though you had a $5 million surplus, from an operational standpoint, you were almost at $16 million. So you had a really strong year from an operations standpoint, and you conducted a lot of just various capital projects. As you look at the next page, on page 4, this just simply shows it to you pictorially over the last 5 years. If you compare 2009 to 2013, you were at about $139 million in net worth, and you can see, as we just looked at, you accumulated just over $152 million over this 5-year period of time. And as you look at the composition, the blue is the discretionary piece that I mentioned. It was at $11 million 5 years ago. It's at $18 million, or just shy of $18 million today. So you've had a nice accumulation of resources here. And really what you've seen it is in the restricted categories. The green piece, you know, which is basically you know those same categories of drainage, different activities that have a special funding source. You can see you've accumulated a lot of resources. It's great, great from a net worth standpoint. But here again, you do have some limitation in terms of just what you can do. And at the same time you were growing net worth over the same period of time, you can see what's happened at the red piece, that basically you had capital outlay money in 2009 that represented a large portion of resources on hand, and by design you spend that down, and you can see that's really come down considerably. But over the period you've grown net worth as a total, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. Here on page 5, basically looking at cash and investments, the whole point to this is that the net worth that you own closely resembles the cash that you hold. So if you're going to have an asset, obviously cash is the best one to have. And so you can see that we've got our parish has about $142 million in cash with about $152 million in net worth. So the lion's share, when you look at your fund surplus or your fund equity, it's majority of it's cash, which is where you want to be. And you can see that sort of follows the same trend, that the accumulation in those discretionary and restricted operating categories have grown while you've depleted capital outlay dollars. Here, looking at the next page on page 6, the point I want to make here is that you look at your liabilities and you start back from 2009, where you're at about $110 million in overall debt, and if you come fast forward 5 years, you can see now you're at about $100 million. So over the course of time, not only have you accumulated cash, as we saw on the last graph, where basically we were at, right at about $130 million a few years ago. Now we're at 142. We've accumulated a fair amount of cash over this 5-year trend. We've done that while retiring debt and eliminating $10 million of debt over that same period of time. So that's obvious. And in addition to that, spending down capital outlay resources. So you've accumulated a lot of cash at the same time that you're retiring bank debt, which is leading to the net worth growth that you're seeing. And really how all that's occurring as you get into the next set of graphs just operationally what's going on to allow you to spend down a lot of capital resources, retire debt, but yet continue to accumulate resources. Basically you look at 2009, and really the thing that you've been able to experience, or the parish has seen, is a large growth in taxes, both property and sales tax, particularly in the last 2 years. As you go back to 2009, you were at about $55 million in joint property tax and sales tax collections. This year, in 2013, you got right at about $75 million. So you've had about a $20 million increase over that period of time. And as a result, you've been able to really experience some really good wealth. As you look at the next page, and keep this particular graph in mind, you've grown revenue at a pretty rapid pace in the last 2 years, but you look at what's happening from a spending perspective. As I mentioned earlier, the green piece of this, I'll start with that basically the capital outlay spending has really gone at a higher level over the last 4 years. But if you focus for a moment on the blue component, which is your operating expenses, you really can see, although it's moved around from year to year, overall it stayed pretty flat over the 5-year period. In fact, if you look at 2009 and compare it to 2013, you're actually spending less money from an operational standpoint. So basically what I'm saying is you've had a large uptick in taxes, and you've stayed pretty disciplined in your spending. So you're spending at the same levels while revenue has grown considerably over this 5-year period, which has allowed you to basically bank all the cash. So, as a taxpayer, I can tell you that's what I like to see. You're able to really accumulate some dollars, keep spending at a pretty flat level, and you're able to just accumulate money that you probably can throw towards different projects, particularly from an infrastructure perspective. So it gives you a lot of flexibility overall. This last graph is basically just showing you what's happening with sales tax, and you can kind of see it from the one I just went over. But these are the 3 components of sales tax that you receive, and as you can see, just over the last 2 years, you've experienced a lot of growth. The good news is that you're holding on to a good bit of it. The only one that's really significant that I'll mention is the blue one, which is the discretionary unrestricted tax. This is where the parish is able to really do a lot of projects that aren't specially funded. That to the extent things occur that the parish council needs to address that doesn't have a special funding source, this is where you get it. Fortunately, you're seeing that tax grow. And then on the last page, we had 3 items that were reportable. They're sort of in the back of the book. I won't go to them in too much detail other than to say that one of them is, the first one is a financial item that we talked about with President Martinez, and this is something that's been widely publicized with your court system, an error that occurred at the sheriff's office, and you basically are the administrator of the funds, and basically that we had to record an adjustment to recognize an obligation that the sheriff collects and disperses funds to the parish from court collections, and it goes to multiple court systems, and basically you administer one of the court systems, and there was an error in how much was being sent to you that it meant to go to another system, and it sort of was outside of your control. But the adjustment resulted in a deficit in that fund, so that obligation is going to have to be paid back, and just basically is a technical violation of the State Budget Act. So that's why it's reported here. But as I appreciate it, it's being corrected. The last 2 items are very, very small, really just technical findings. The first dealing with the Parish Transportation Act, that you have a capital outlay plan that you have adopted, and it just requires a ratification from the governing authority on an annual basis, which didn't occur last year. You recently did that, so it's really a resolved matter at this point in time. But it's just something you've got to do on an annual basis. And then the final one is that HUD has changed a lot of how their reports are received. You can no longer send them paper. You have to file electronic reports on everything you submit to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. There's one report that just wasn't submitted under that system, which is being corrected now. So it's just the annual audit information. And so we've met with your administrator, and that's going to be taken care of. But outside of that, I mean, we look at a lot of things from a state and federal compliance standpoint, not only for the grants you receive, but also a lot of financial laws that you're required to follow, that are state laws. And then we also look at a lot of, all your internal accounting practices. And then really, I look at these, 2 of them are very easy things to correct. The fund deficit was really something that you're just an administrator of someone else's funds, and the one directing you to how to use the money is sort of not within your normal purview. So, it really wasn't an error that was on your side of the fence from my standpoint. The last thing I'll finish up with is that we had 3 prior year findings that you'll see at the back of the book were all corrected. So we do follow up on those. And basically, that's it.
One quick question,
Sure, Todd.
and it might go to administration, I'm not sure. On this court fund, you said it had to be paid back. Who is paying it back? Is it coming from the parish, or is it the court system?
Coming from the parish.
Since they directed the money to another court,
Yeah.
somebody got overpaid.
Right. Well, what happens under this court system, you get funds sent to you, you administer certain costs on that court's behalf. When, by law, at the conclusion of each year, if there's a surplus, 1/2 of it is provided to your general fund. And that's, been a long-time law. So if we had dollars sent to us erroneously, 1/2 of those dollars were then rededicated to the general fund. So that's kind of how it got itself into a deficit. And you were following normal practice, so there wasn't anything erroneous with the practice. It was just what the person that was, the office that's collecting the funds and sending it to you did it incorrectly. And you operated as you should have, from my perspective.
Mr. Martinez.
Basically, Todd, it's the parish court fund and the state court
I'm
fund.
familiar with it.
And basically, we were sent the money to go to the state criminal fund, and basically, it was supposed to be dedicated to the parish fund. So they were collecting the fines for the parish court and sending them to the criminal court fund, 23rd Judicial Fund. And now we have to go back and pay back parish court.
And we have something in the system to protect that now from happening again?
Well, it went on from 2006 until now, and when it was caught, so.
Yeah, what's problematic is it's part of another person's system, not yours.
And the problem is that we're responsible for the criminal court system, so if it's short, we got to pay it back anyway. So, this year, it's going to cost us about $500,000, but we're going to end up having to pay back right at $1 million.
The one thing I'll add, too, is those net worth statistics that I went over earlier were net of that obligation. So it won't be coming out of those funds because you've recognized the obligation. It's just a matter of when you utilize the cash to pay it back.
Councilman Shakespeare.
Couple questions, just, when you start talking about budgets and everything, it gets complicated. When you say cash, that's $100 bills sitting in the bank? Okay,
That's cash and investments.
okay. And so that's the value of of what? What does that include?
That's all your cash funds, all the funds that you administer. It's not external agencies. It's basically the funds this council has responsibility for.
Okay.
And Gwen's office administers on your behalf. But it's all your internal bank accounts, CDs, and treasury bills, things that you invest some of your idle funds with. So it's
Okay.
everything.
All right, and then the debt service for the last few years, is our debt, I mean, we get these numbers.
Mm-hmm.
How does that compare, with debt service? We're in good shape with debt service and everything?
Yeah, I mean,
It seems
you
like-
funded your debt service accounts as required by your debt agreements.
And this comparison helps us with our bond rating and all that?
You
Okay.
have a very high bond rating.
Now, what about, what is it now, the bond rating? Double A, okay. And when we talked about the fund balance was 17 million, I think 600 something thousand. You said that's a positive because it was $3 or $4 million a few years ago. What are we trying to get to, President Martinez? And why?
Basically, we call this our rainy day fund, and I think when we started this administration, 6.5, 7 years ago, it was relatively low, and we discussed it, and our goal was to get to $20 million. So we're a little bit shy, but I think by the time we end this term, we'll be at the $20 million mark. And what happens is that in the event we have a bad year as far as tax collection, you have money there to cover your deficits. The other thing is that you have to remember is if you have a storm, a hurricane, any kind of disaster, you get repaid by the federal government on most of the reimbursed. But you have to put that money up first. You have to have the money available to pay for those services, and then you get reimbursed. So you got to have a cash balance there to be able to operate during that time. So, when as I said, when we came on, it was dangerously low to where a point would have been if we'd have had any kind of disaster, anything that we'd have had to come up with a lot of money on, we might have been short. So, like I said, we set our goal of 20 million, and hopefully we can attain that. I'm sure we will. And at that point, from then on, you probably won't have to put any more aside. I think that would be enough aside to handle any kind of thing. So you can maybe put that money or dedicate that money to roads or something else. And also on the debt service, we should, 2015, $1 million a year that we're paying on the road project that we did, debt service there, that's going to go off the books. We'll have that paid off. So that'll be an extra $1 million coming in as far as your road funds go.
Okay. And then the operations has actually gone down, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
If you
so
look at that
that's-
5-year period, you go back to 2009, it's at, if you look at the average of those 5 years, I mean, it's pretty flat.
Okay.
And I
It's
hear a
actually
lot
down
about
from
doing more with less.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing more with less. So the proof's in the pudding. You can look at it, and the numbers are there. They don't lie. So I just wanted to make that observation also.
Yeah. But the good news is that, sales tax is something that is going to fluctuate. It's a roller
Yeah.
coaster. And not spending up to the high points is going to keep you out of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I was here whenever we had bad years, and so it was
Yeah.
tough. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I just have a comment. To save money and pay down debt and continue to operate your enterprise is the goal of any high-functioning business. And so I certainly applaud the administration and this council and previous ones that were involved in putting us on a path to sound financial footing. And we certainly hope to work together, and we'll continue to work together to maintain that. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Tommy,
Absolutely.
for coming.
Thank you again.
All right, we'll move along to what is now item number 6. It has come to my attention that the work level on the committee to study impact fees is extremely high. And so I have decided to appoint 2 more members to that committee, and they are Margie Swanson and Linda Evans. I'm not sure if they're here this evening, but I would like to vote of this body to appoint those 2 ladies to assist the Impact Fee Committee.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Joseph and a second by Councilman Lohr. Do I have any objections to that? Hearing none, that motion passes. I thank you for that. Item number 7, Mr. Eads and his cohort. Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, members of council. I'll be brief as I can. You have our report in front of you. We've had 3 announcements this year so far in the parish. You can see a summary of current project activity. I would like to point out that if you look at that number of the A projects, the 18 A project was about $17 billion of potential capital investment. That we're standing before you this time last year talking about one project that was $12.5 billion. And now we've got 18 that are more, put together more than that, which I think is a good thing. And it's quite a variety of activity going on. We've got 2 announcements pending, you see down there at the bottom, and a bunch of decisions pending and projects looking. Make a couple of comments on the decisions pending, the project Dashboard 3. That company has already made 2 announcements in the parish in the last few years, and we're looking at another one. They've made an offer on another one. Also, if you read down through there, you'll see that a number of those projects are looking at Point Sunshine as a possible location. Of course, we're not going we can't get but one at a time, but I'm pleased to tell you I can't get very specific with you about it, but one of those projects is looking very, very promising on Point Sunshine. And it's been many years, as you know, we've been promoting that. And I think finally the right match may have come along. Not willing to make a commitment to you, but I feel very positive about it. Hopefully something good is going to happen on that property in the not too distant future. Other things, Avalon Rare Metals, the project has been drawn out for quite some time, but they did just very recently, in the last couple of weeks, extend the option on the property in Geismar, which is encouraging. So they continue to study that. Also, our dynamic fuels. As some of you know, that project has been idle since October of 2012. It has been sold to a company called Renewable Energy Incorporated. That both the Centrolium and the Tyson interest have been sold to that entity. I have it from a really good inside source that that project's going to restart here in the fairly near future. Can't give away who my source is, but I think it's credible. We also are continuing to work on our site evaluation. We're looking at vacant properties in the parish and what we need to do to turn those into marketable economic development properties. We started out with the large sites, the 25-plus acres, and we ended up with about 86 or 87 of those and continued to study. We got it down to about 20 or 25 that we're still working on. And now our consultants are starting to look at the smaller ones, the 10 to 25 acres. We're still pursuing that. I'll turn it over to Lisa here for a minute to talk about our existing industry program.
Our business retention program, we try to meet with our local existing industries. We have a goal of 45 for this year. So far, we've met with 21 of those. And we've uncovered a possibility of 4 expansions at those locations. And everyone reports the business is great in Ascension.
Thank you, Lisa. Finally, last but not least, we issued a request for proposals. This is part of our program of work and our strategic plan. We issued an RFP a month or so ago for a diversification strategy for economic development for the parish. I think it's a very, very important thing we're doing here. We have been very fortunate to be blessed with major investments and major employers from the petrochemical and chemical industries, and hopefully that'll continue on for a number of years. But as you realize, I think, and we do, that there's threats. There's always threats to that group of industries, either energy prices or regulation or the combination of both. And so we need to be looking ahead down the road to say, what do we need to do to further diversify the economy of Ascension? I think the other important thing is we need to do whatever we can to, I don't think we're going to ever totally reverse, but to try to turn the tide of people who live in Ascension but don't work here, and see if we can help change that some by having a more varied set of jobs, have some better job opportunities, and hopefully our people will stay home and work instead of going to other parishes and spending their hard-earned money while they're there. So we're working on that. That's hopefully our board will make the selection of a contractor on that project this Thursday, and we'll be working very closely with you and others to bring that thing to fruition here in the next few months. That concludes our report, unless you have any questions.
Gentlemen, any questions? Councilman Kluai.
Real quick, Mike, did we be getting any input from anybody in the film industry for something on a more permanent basis other than just filming?
No, I think there's still some activity out there, particularly in Donaldsonville. Donaldsonville has done very well in attracting the film industry, and there's still quite a bit of activity. And you know, we're always out there looking and responding to opportunities when we get them. I think Louisiana continues to be very well positioned in that industry. I think we're number 3 in the nation. Outside of L.A. and Connecticut, and I don't see that slowing down. I think as every day goes by, building up a bigger and bigger infrastructure, which is very important. You know, the studio at Baton Rouge and other entities that are out there. You know, I think the future is good.
Thanks, sir.
Councilman Joseph.
Yeah, Mike, I'm looking at this here and you see a tract of land above Donaldsonville, and one of the questions I have is that you got it in here for rezoning. What type of rezoning? More industrial rezoning or?
Correct. We are, as we stand here, vacant of, for all intents and purposes, we are vacant of usable industrial sites on the East Bank. And we look across the river and we see a lot of vacant land with a lot of potential that's never been developed. And that's one of the things we are taking a look at. Is there an opportunity there for us? There's some challenges over there that you don't face on this side of the river. One is the navigability, well, not navigability of the river, but the ability to place infrastructure in the river. Docks, you know, barge and ship docks is challenging over there, frankly, for a lot of reasons. You don't have, in a lot of the area above Donaldsonville on the river, the railroad is a long way from the river. After you get just north of Donaldsonville, as Highway 1 goes straight, the river turns. And so you don't get too far up there until, let's say, it's a haul, frankly, to get rail into there. So there's some challenges, but nonetheless, I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity over there. And we are taking a look at that and having some conversations. It would need to be rezoned to receive industrial development. It is entirely, except for one piece that's owned by the Port Authority, it is entirely conservation. So we'll need to be working through that with planning staff and the Planning Commission and you as we look forward to that. We'll hopefully be coming to you in the not-too-distant future with some recommendations.
I'll be looking forward for that there,
Yes, sir.
Mike, because we definitely need it on the West Bank.
Understand.
Changes. Thanks.
Any further comments or questions? Mike, thank you and Lisa both for being here. I know you waited a long time. I appreciate your patience, and we thank you for each and every time that you come and bring us the kind of good news that you brought us tonight. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Angele Desatel will bring a report to this council to this committee from the Ascension Parish Library. Angele, welcome.
Thank you very much for the invitation to present to you all tonight, and I will try not to be too long because I know it's been a long evening for you all. Each of you should have a packet of information, and inside of the packet is our latest annual report with that information. On page 2, we have the statement of objectives for the public library, why we're here and what our purpose is. On page 3, we have our 2014 budgeted revenue, and our total budgeted revenue for this year is $7,194,756. This is based on the September numbers. We have had a slight increase of a couple of $100,000 above this. And as you see the breakdown, the majority of the tax is in ad valorem. 58% of it is the 4.2 mils. And then 36% of our ad valorem is the 2.6 mils. Then we have state revenue sharing, or which we receive. We have fees and charges that we charge for damaged materials, lost materials, that type of thing, fines and forfeitures, and then interest rates. We have state aid to public libraries on here, but that was zeroed out a couple of years ago. And the last time that happened, it was an 8-year period before we received any additional state aid to public libraries. So until the state's environment improves, we don't anticipate that. In the last few years, that money was designated for the automation use, and so we have had to redirect funds to cover our automation needs that the state aid was covering. On page 4, we have a breakdown of the per capita local operating revenue for the population served, and what we show here are the river parishes. And as you can see, Ascension has $51.45 for per capita per individuals in this parish. And as you can see, we are a little on the low end as far as per capita. East Baton Rouge is $87.51, and then some of our surrounding parishes are substantial. The only two parishes listed here that are lower in per capita than Ascension are Iberville and Assumption. The next page, page 5, is our budgeted expenditures. You can see that the majority of our budgeted expenditures go towards personnel. Of that $4 million, $1 million of that is benefits. That's the FICA payments, the retirement, the life, dental, and health, and unemployment insurance. We have a total of 63.6 full-time equivalent employees. We have 74 employees, but not all of them work full-time. So we have the equivalent of 63.6 full-time employees. We have operating services. This is where the utilities go, the contractual maintenance, that type of thing. We have materials and supplies, which is the basic running of any business and library in business. Continuing education and travel, we expect our employees to have continuing education, a certain amount of it every year. So if we're going to send them for continuing education, the library does cover the cost of that. Capital outlay is basically any machinery and equipment we purchase, and library materials and vehicles, that type of thing. Then we have intergovernmental obligations. This is where the pension fund goes. You all are all familiar with the contributions that any taxing authority makes to the state for pension funds. This is where the intergovernmental agreement with the parish goes for the payment of the bond for the construction of Dutchtown and the expansion of Gonzales, and also any other intergovernmental occurrences that may happen. Then on page 6, we have budgeted capital projects fund. Currently, those funds, we have $4,167,967. Total projected construction fund projects are at $7,525,000. We're currently working on the Galvez expansion. We're in need of doubling the size of Galvez. So we hope by the end of the year to be going to bid on that project. We have Donaldsonville expansion and renovation. Donaldsonville is 34 years old. We do need to look at the facility and see what the effectiveness is of the way it's designed and see if we need to make any changes to it. Then we have set aside, once we have the funds, $4.7 million for the construction of the Santa Mall location. We have the land. It is high and dry. We checked it. And we anticipate that it will be a 20,000 square foot facility, approximately the size of Dutchtown. So, then a couple of other numbers we have on page 7. We have our annual library visits. And as you can see, in the last 10 years, we've seen a 109% increase in the public using the public library. A lot of that has to do with the amount of growth that's occurred. And a lot of these people who are moving into this parish are coming from East Baton Rouge, and they're used to a very extensive library system, and they expect the same when they get to us. So I think that we're doing a very good job considering our population size. We see approximately 9,000 people a week throughout the parish library system. The next item we show is the circulation of library materials. This includes books, e-books, audios, videos, whatever else we may have available for checkout to the public. And in the last 10 years, we've seen a 34% increase in those activities. On page 9, we have a few other statistics that we have. We have 37,659 current library users. This is a current number. We continually purge our database. So these are people with active library cards. We had, in 2013, we had 1,394 library programs with an attendance of 71,691. And then on page 10, we, of course, had to mention this. The effort in improving services has led to the library being awarded the 2014 James O. Modisette Award for Public Libraries from the Louisiana Library Association. So you're living in the parish with the Public Library of the Year for the state. So we're real pleased
Congratulations.
with that. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about this information?
On Jill.
Yes, sir.
On the budgeted capital project funds, you said current funds $4,167,000.
Yes, sir.
And then you say Galvez expansion and renovation is underway. Has those funds been put aside? Is the $4 million less the Galvez or including the Galvez project?
The $4 million includes the Galvez project. What we're looking at right now, and that's a very good point, we cannot build Santamon until we have accumulated the funds for that. And in fact, we can't build, we can't build Santamon until we have the funds for Santamon. We have the funds to complete the Galvez project and the Donaldsonville project. Santamon, there are two things that have to occur first. Number one, we need the money to build the facility. And number two, we have to have sustainable income in the budget to run the facility once it's built. But with the recent information from the assessor, we're hoping that we can reach sustainability in about 2 years, and that within a 5-year period, we should be able to start construction on Santamon.
Okay, that's what I needed to know.
I got a quick,
Councilman Kluwat.
Angel, on the Santamon, you saying that you can't build a Santamon until you have the money in hand?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
No bond issue, nothing?
No, sir.
You can
We
wait till you
had-
got cash?
We have to have the cash.
Is that how you done the rest of them?
That, other than the bond that paid for Dutchtown, the parish bonded out, the parish council bonded out the money for the construction of Dutchtown and the expansion of Gonzales. The Galvez, Donaldsonville, and Santamon, we have to save the money to do it.
I'm talking about the original libraries, the Galvez, the Gonzales, and the Dutchtown. So you're saying that you bonded for Dutchtown,
Yes, sir, we did.
and I think you bonded didn't you bond for Galvez also?
We bonded for Dutchtown and Gonzales. We had to decrease the bond because of the intergovernmental agreement. We had to be able to pay it out of the general fund, and we did not have enough money to bond Galvez and Donaldsonville, which would have been part of the project. So we had to decrease the bond amount that we asked for, and that the parish had bonded for us. So we're saving the money right now for that. And we're also going to save for Sanimal in the same manner. But we are hoping that once we reach the sustainability, we will begin putting the sustainable money into construction to build it, and then we know we'll be able to sustain.
But what you're saying is Galvez is going to be renovated and Downsville will be expanded and renovated before anything's done on Sanamo.
Yes, sir, that was how
Okay.
we laid out the building program. The state legislature, with the construction of Galvez in 1992, passed a state statute that allowed for 7 public libraries, to be able to transfer funds from the general fund to a construction fund each year if they so chose to do that, with the logic being you can't do it unless you have the extra funds to do the construction without damaging the operation of the facilities. So that is the statute we're using right
Okay.
now to transfer the money.
Any further questions, gentlemen? Obviously not. Angel, thank you so much for coming and
Thank
presenting
you.
such a thorough evaluation, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much. If you all have any questions and want to give us a call, we'd appreciate the call. Thank you.
Absolutely. Item number 9, review and update of the Section 8 program. Mr. Roberto Macedo. Good evening, sir.
Madam Chairman, Mr. President, members of the council, good evening. For those that don't know me or haven't seen me lately, I'm Roberto Macedo. I've been the administrator for the parish's Section 8 program / rental assistance program for quite some time now. Thank you for your invitation to give you a little update on the program. A couple of financial items. We spend about $50,000 a month in assisting families throughout the parish, and that would be excluding the city of Donaldsonville. The city of Donaldsonville has its own program, but the rest of the parish is assisted by the Section 8 program for the unincorporated areas. Currently, the program is full. We have 90 families receiving rental assistance. And as you know, this is a program that is funded by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. They provide all the funding for this assistance, as well as the funding for the administration of the program. So there are no local funds that are necessary from your bank. The program has stayed pretty much the same for many years now. HUD is not issuing any invitations for the increase of vouchers for this program. In other words, for the increase of other families beyond the 95 that we have. We've covered this subject before. Once the family gets in the program, of course, with all the requirements, if they meet all the obligations and all the issues that HUD requires, they can stay in the program for quite some time. When a family leaves the program, whether it's because of their own doing, or if we remove a family for fraud or program violations, then we go to the next family in the waiting list, and that's how the new families come and receive assistance. Another item of interest is that the families pay part of the rent, and that portion of the rent depends on their income. They're required to pay 30% of their adjusted income towards the rent. Most of our tenants are elderly and disabled folks, and also we have quite a few number of large families, primarily single mothers with with small children. Any questions?
Councilman Joseph.
We have about 45 in our waiting list. Yes.
Councilman Joseph.
Yeah. How you doing, Roberta? Hey,
Doing
I
fine,
want
sir.
to clear, you have 90 families in Ascension Parish?
95.
95. That is and I mean, just from the previous years, it was about like 72 in the 70s a couple of years ago, maybe about 3 years ago.
The total of 95 includes 7 families that had received assistance because of Hurricane Gustav. At one point, we were assisting perhaps 40 or 50 families because they were displaced by Hurricane Gustav. And when that program was terminated, we were lucky to have 7 families eligible to continue or to transfer to the regular program. So that's why the numbers are a little bit different.
Okay, answer. You said Downsonville they excluded. How many they have on their program in the city of Downsonville?
It's about the same number.
About 9? Oh,
Yes.
Okay, so that number really didn't go, we were still right about 180, what's that number?
Correct, correct. And it's
Okay.
not growing, and HUD, you know, with all the problems with the federal budget and the deficits, they're not increasing assistance for this program. It's been pretty steady throughout the last 5-6 years.
Okay. One more question is, I know your system is you have a 1 day to get on the list, 24-hour call center. Is that still active, and when that date is for them to try to get on the list?
HUD requires that once your waiting list, your current waiting list goes down to maybe 5 or 6 families, that then you replenish, and that's when we make the announcement. But, you know, that waiting list moves very slowly. Like I said, only if a family chooses to leave the program because their income has increased and they don't need the assistance anymore, or if there's fraud, and we have several systems in place to determine if the family is reporting the income accurately. So that waiting list just moves at a very slow pace. But when we are in a position to take new names, we do that 1-800 number, and we publish that in the official journal, so everybody will have the opportunity to apply.
And the last time you did that was about 3 years ago.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Councilman Shea Snyder.
Yes, I've been asked a number of occasions, Mr. Mercedo, about a subdivision coming in and having HUD housing in the subdivision. Is that how that works, or
No.
explain that?
Yeah, the Section 8 program came about, HUD had some years back housing developments or housing projects, public housing. And the congregation of families of low income created atmospheres that were not very nice for them. So they came up with this idea of the Section 8 program. And basically, this program, you can have families that are being assisted throughout the parish in different types of units. It could be an apartment complex, it could be a single home, it could be a mobile home, providing that meets all the housing standards. But there's no such thing as a Section 8 house. It only becomes a Section 8 house when the landlord agrees to accept that voucher, accept that tenant, and that becomes a Section 8 assisted unit. It could be a year's lease, and then after that, the landlord said, I don't want to fool with it. And that house becomes a regular rental unit. So there's no specific requirements. It's all over the parish.
Yeah, and, you know, we keep getting that as, you know, that, this subdivision here, this subdivision there is gonna be Section 8 housing.
No.
And I just, you know, wanna make sure people know and understand that the Section 8 housing is dependent upon, the owners and the renters and their decision throughout the parish whether they're going to, rent or participate in the program. And
Correct.
so it is spread all throughout the parish.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody understands, because it is, you know, perception that you were talking about large housing complexes and the thoughts to that, so. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, no, my phone was ringing. Had some kind of emergency going on. I'll go check that. Randy, did you have a question?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right. All right, thank you so much.
One last comment.
Sure.
I want to thank your finance department. We work very well together, especially nowadays that HUD requires that we report everything, even the smallest amount of interest on a monthly basis in an electronic reporting system. So thank you for your assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time. Item number 10, the settlement with Enterprise in the amount of $24,973 for unit number GKV162, a 2013 Ford F-150. Go ahead,
This is-
Lindsay.
Yes, this is payment of a claim for damages to Enterprise for a vehicle that was under our lease program dating back to an accident of January 6th of this year. The parish looked at repairing the vehicle, but that was not feasible.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Lambert, second by Councilman Joseph. Any discussion? Any opposition? Hearing none, that motion passes. Moving on to item number 11, ordinance to authorize the use of equipment installment purchase agreements. Ms. Manda.
This ordinance will allow the parish to lease purchase vehicles and equipment rather than make these lump sum capital expenditures on vehicles and equipment.
Motion by Councilman Kluwat,
Second.
second by Councilman Saddle. Any discussion? Any questions? Any opposition? That motion passes. Moving on to item 13, a renewal of a contract with G&K Services, Uniform Rentals, and Flat Supply, mops, floor mats, rentals. Ms. Cheryl Kinchin? Did I miss one? I'm sorry. SJB change order, okay. Let me find that on here, where are we at? Okay, here we go. Capital Construction, change order number 2, Capital Construction, Oak Grove Community Center. Mr. Muller. Sorry about that, Mike.
That's correct. That's okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you got that correction. SJB was on here, but it is actually capital construction. Basically, it's just a change order for 67 days added on to the construction time. No money's going to change or anything, just.
So moved.
just-
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Joseph, second by Councilman Kluwat. Any discussion? Any opposition? That motion passes.
Thank you.
Turn the chair back over.
Thank you. You got 10?
Yes, we are here too.
Item number 13, renewal of contract with G&K Services, Uniform Rentals and Flat Supply, mops, floors, mats, rentals. Cheryl Kinchin.
These are our uniforms that our employees wear, and our brooms, our mops, our mats, our cleaning supplies. So basically, I'm here to answer any questions other than, I think this went out for bid. and
Any
they
questions?
won.
So move. Second.
Motion by Councilman Todd Lambert, second by Councilman Benny Johnson. Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, Joan.
You're welcome. Item number 14, Glenn G. Shaheen and Associates Incorporated, renewal of a master contract for professional services for infrastructure-related projects throughout the parish, not to exceed $90,000. Bob Horner, Chief Engineer. Welcome, Mr. Horner.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. This is just a renewal of our annual, of our master contract for the professional services.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Councilman Dempsey Lambert, second by Councilman Benny Johnson. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Oops, Mr. President?
These are like 2-year contracts, and they were for originally $100,000, and we spent $10,000 last year, so we're just moving So it's not like, it's not a new it's just renewing that.
Correct.
And not upping the amount any. The original amount was 100,000. They spent 10 last year.
Thank you for the clarification. That motion passes. Item number 15, Volkert, renewal of a master contract for professional services. Excuse me, Mr. Joseph.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just want to make sure your numbers is corresponding to what I have. You're saying 14, this is item number 13 on.
We had a move in the beginning. We took 18 to 5, excuse me.
That's why you're doing that, okay.
Look, I have a hard enough time keeping track of this. Don't confuse me.
All right, Mr. Chairman, you got it.
This time, I wasn't off. Okay, where are we again? Volkert is number 15.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Randy Kluot, second by Councilman Chris Lohr. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 16, got me messed up here. I understand that this was printed incorrectly, and if you will give me no? Oh, you already did that one, I'm sorry. That's the one I was going for. This one's correct. Item number 16, SJB Group LLC, Utilities Department Renewal of Master Contract for Professional Services for Infrastructure-Related Projects throughout the parish not to exceed $100,000. You got it, Brian.
Yes, ma'am. It's a request to renew. It's the third of the engineering services for support
Motion.
specifically for utilities.
Motion by Councilman Benny Johnson, second by Councilman Todd Lambert. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 17, substantial completion of the DPW wash facility, ENG 11-020. Michael Petty, Senior Project Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We're just requesting the approval for the substantial completion on the DPW wash facility. Construction activity was completed around the first part of May. Punch list was established, and the vast majority of those items have been satisfied at this point.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Randy Kluot, second by Todd Lambert. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 18, the monthly contracts report. Ms. Sandra.
Good evening. This is a list of all the contracts that were entered into in the month of May.
Any questions on those, gentlemen? All right, we'll move along.
Thank you.
Item number 19, we moved him. Now we're at item number 20, the sales and use tax report.
Good afternoon. You have before you your regular sales tax report. This is for the April collections, which represents March sales. You can see by all of our 3 taxing districts that year-to-date and April collections compared to April 13 are all down a little bit. More so in sales tax district number 1, and that's due to the rebates. If you look on the far right-hand column, this is budget comparison. You have your 2014 budget figures for each district, the collections to date, and what's remaining in the budget. And then this is at 33.33% of the year, so you can see each district is above that. And the second page is the bar chart that's showing just the 1 cent sales tax. And this is year-to-date, January through April. And it's comparing 14 to 13. And you can see the petrochemical industry is the only factor that's a little bit down year-to-date. And the pie chart just gives you a kind of a brief description of where your sales taxes are collected using the 1 cent sales tax. And the last page is the historical depiction of sales taxes since 2005. And you can see what a great year 2013 was. And the yellow part of the bar, each bar represents year-to-date collections, and you can see that we're not too far off from the same time last year for each of the 3 taxing districts. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any questions, gentlemen? Hearing none, We'll move along to the revenue and expenditure report. Ms. Amanda.
Good evening. Before you are the normal financial reports for the month of April 2014. Page 1, revenues are at 30.90%. Page 2, expenditures at 30.64% at 33.33% of the year. On page 3 are charts that compare year-to-date revenue and expenditure for both operating and capital to the budget. Page 4 and 5 gives you a brief explanation of funds that are highlighted on page 1 and 2 that are under the budget for revenues or over the budget for expenditures by 5% or more at this point in the year. The last page reflects all checks issued in April over $100,000, and the total of these checks are $1,516,791.89. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions, gentlemen? Hearing none, we'll move along. Budget amendment number 3. Excuse me, that motion passes. Budget amendment number 3.
Good evening. You have before you
Good
an ordinance for budget amendment number 3, which reads as follows. An ordinance to amend the ordinance approving, adopting, and appropriating the 2014 operating and capital budgets for the Parish of Ascension, adopted by the Ascension Parish Council on the 7th day of November, 2013. Section 1. The Ascension Parish Council hereby ordains that the Parish of Ascension is hereby amended, approved, and appropriated as follows. Operating budget, ACUD number 2, expenditures and other financing uses. Transfer out to the Water Wastewater Construction Fund, $1 million. Capital budget, Water Wastewater Construction Fund. Revenues and other financing sources, transfer in from ACUD number 2, $1 million. Expenditures and other financing uses, engineering fees, $1 million.
Motion.
Have a motion by
Second.
Councilman Benny Johnson, second by Councilman Oliver Joseph. Do I have any questions? Any comments?
This is just the money to go ahead and get our sewer program going and pay for the engineering that we awarded the contract. We don't think we're going to spend the whole 2.4 this year, so we amended the budget to $1 million. If we need to come back, we'll come back at a later date, but that's what this is about.
Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Bid items. To accept the lowest responsive bid, Ms. Joan Shivers.
On May 12, 2014, the Purchasing Department received one bid for the right to act as the official journal. After review, the Purchasing Department and Parish Secretary recommend accepting the lowest responsive bid from the Gonzales Weekly Citizen and to authorize the Parish President to enter into any applicable agreement or contract for this service.
So moved, Madam Chairman.
A motion by Councilman Todd Lambert. Second by Councilman Melancon. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Councilman Lambert.
You don't have A on that, is that something different? That's all I'm saying.
That was it.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Good night.